I bought my Nintendo Switch 2 at a GameStop midnight launch, and I want to give you my honest thoughts on this console 1 year later. But if I'm being completely honest, I do have some regrets when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. The first one is buying this game here at launch, the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, because I did pay $10 for this, and while I was entertained for maybe an hour or two, trying out the little tech demo mini games, learning about the technology behind the Nintendo Switch 2 console itself, honestly, this game just could not keep my attention beyond just a couple hours, and I did end up regretting spending those $10 on the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. I truly believe Nintendo should have made that game free, and especially with things getting more expensive and them having to raise the console price these days very soon, I think they should at least include the Switch 2 Welcome Tour free for anyone who buys the console. One of the biggest controversies surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2 has of course been game keycards. But I do understand why Nintendo created these, because as technology advances, the file sizes of these video games get bigger, and if you can't fit everything on a 64 GB cartridge, Nintendo did have to come up with some kind of alternative to avoid all these third-party games becoming full digital releases. But I think what bothers me and a lot of other people so much about game keycards is the fact that a lot of these third-party companies can fit their games on true physical cartridges if they wanted to, but instead they choose to cheap out and put everything on a keycard anyway. So as you can see here, I do have a keycard. I do own a couple of other ones as well that I bought early on because there weren't too many options of true physical games to pick up. But I still haven't fully come around to keycards, if I'm being honest. It just isn't exciting for me to buy one of these as it is, as a true physical game that is on the cart. Now, part of that might just be because I have a huge backlog of true physical games, and I know a lot of times these keycards are going to go on sale and get cheaper anyway, so what I've been doing pretty much is waiting for these to go on sale, and I do just have a bit of regret of buying some of them at full price early on, like I did with this game that I haven't even played yet, but that's more my fault than anything, so I can't be mad at Nintendo or anyone else for that. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I actually don't have too many regrets when it comes to picking up a Nintendo Switch 2. But honestly, it seems like the YouTube algorithm just screws over my videos for me just giving my honest and positive opinions. So I thought if I packaged it this way, maybe I'd have a little bit more luck in the algorithm, but I am just giving my honest thoughts. So if you'd like to help me out, please hit the like button and the hype button to help this video get pushed out in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. But the last final regret that I do have, maybe it's my own fault, maybe I shouldn't have paid for this, but I did subscribe to the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack Plus to get the GameCube games, even got the GameCube controller, and honestly, I barely touched the GameCube games that I have on that subscription, so that was probably money that I did not need to spend. I think Nintendo, with a year like they had with not so many big first-party games, I think they could have definitely given us more GameCube games for the online service. It has been a slow drip feed, so I do have to be a little bit critical of Nintendo about that. Hasn't been terrible, but it could definitely have been better. So now that I've gotten the few little bit of regrets that I have about the Switch 2 out of the way, I want to talk about the positives, and I am going to talk about the console itself, but I would like to start with the gaming experiences that really stuck out to me and really made the Switch 2 worth buying. And I'll go ahead and start with the first big launch game by Nintendo, which is Mario Kart World. Now, I have to be honest, the Mario Kart game that I was most into was probably Mario Kart 64 as a kid, way back on the N64. I thought that game was phenomenal. But ever since then, I've never really truly been a huge Mario Kart fan, but I do have to say Nintendo did knock it out of the park with Mario Kart World. The Knockout Tour is really where everything is at with this game for me. It's just so addictive. It just gets your adrenaline pumping. It's just so much fun. And I have to say that to me, the Knockout Tour in Mario Kart World just makes it the most fun Mario Kart game ever. And I do feel like there is a lot of depth to this game that I haven't fully even gotten into yet, with the different tricks that you can do, jumping off the walls, jumping onto different areas, going for different hidden paths. There's a lot you can do in this game to become better than other racers and gain the advantage of them. This is something that everyone can play casually and get into, but you can become a hardcore player that's better than a lot of other people if you take the time to master the controls and the mechanics in this game as well. The game is just a lot of fun. It has a great soundtrack. Now, the open world, while it's a cool little bonus to have to be able to drive around, find little collectibles and stuff, it was a bit more underwhelming than I expected it to be. I expected it to be, I guess, a bit bigger, more expansive, maybe have a bit more stuff to do, but I still won't knock it and say that it takes anything away from the game. It does add a little bit more gameplay and variety to it, so it is cool to have, but it's just not as big and cool as I thought it would be. So while the Nintendo Switch 2 did launch with a great, fun online game with Mario Kart World, it would be like another month and a half before we got another big exclusive to play from Nintendo. So I went ahead and tried out some of the backwards compatibility. Nintendo did put out some free upgrades for some of their Switch 1 games like Mario Odyssey. So I did get around to playing this before Donkey Kong Bonanza came out. And I have to say, the way this game looks on the Switch 2 now with the free upgrade was enough to get me fully invested in it again. I went ahead and beat the full game, did some of the post-game content that I do need to get back to, and admittedly, I had actually never beat this game on the Switch 1. For some reason, I got to the last level where you have to fight Bowser, and I just never beat it there. So I think the Switch 2 upgrades, the free upgrades that they're doing, and the Switch 2 editions, some of them are paid, do make a huge difference at giving these Switch 1 games a new lease on life and definitely make them worth revisiting. Now, the backwards compatibility for the Switch 2 definitely hasn't been perfect. A lot of these games were looking blurry when you would play them in handheld, but later on, Nintendo did implement something called Boost Mode, which you can turn on in your settings for the Switch 2, which will make all your Switch 1 games play as if they're docked, and that does make a huge difference. One game that I saw the difference on was Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, because when I played that game without the Boost Mode on, I have to admit that it did look pretty blurry and fuzzy, didn't look the best, but with Boost Mode on, it looked crystal clear, looked great, and almost as good as an official Switch 2 upgrade. So the backwards compatibility for the Switch 2 is definitely nice to have, to be able to play all your Switch 1 games looking better and running better, especially in handheld mode. So the second big Switch 2 exclusive that we got after Mario Kart World was, of course, Donkey Kong Bonanza. And I do have to say, I do believe this game is a true system seller that's worth buying the Nintendo Switch 2 for if you like 3D platformers and action adventure games. This game to me feels like a hybrid between both of those genres. It really is a wacky and different, unique game. It's not like any other Donkey Kong game that we've seen before. It does share some similarities with Mario Odyssey as far as finding the collectibles, but the fully destructive environment is something we had never seen before. The different transformations and abilities that you can get for Donkey Kong in this game really make it a lot of fun. The big open-ended areas, the exploration, the phenomenal soundtrack. This game just really has everything that I would want from a big Donkey Kong game. And I do have to admit, I do have a lot of nostalgia growing up with the Donkey Kong Country games. Donkey Kong 64 was one of the first games that I ever played as a kid. But honestly, this game doesn't play anything like those. But I do really like how they finally gave Donkey Kong that big moment that he truly deserves. This game is a lot of fun and is definitely 100% worth buying. If you have a Nintendo Switch 2, I would think you definitely need to give this game a go. So while I definitely haven't gotten around to playing and picking up all the Switch 2 exclusives like Hyrule Warriors and even some of the Switch 2 editions like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, I did get a chance to play Pokemon Legends ZA Nintendo Switch 2 edition, and I have to say that it was really refreshing to finally have a Pokemon game on a Nintendo console in the modern era that actually runs and looks pretty good on the system and is actually a lot of fun. I would have to say that Pokemon Legends ZA really refreshed the formula with the new real-time battle system. It does make it a lot of fun. This game just kind of gets back to the basics for OG Pokemon fans like myself, putting a lot of emphasis on the battles. This is a really fun adventure game that honestly does lack the polish of a lot of other first-party Nintendo games, but it still offers a lot of fun, and it's something that I was glad to be able to experience early on when I picked it up for the Switch 2. Another great Switch 2 exclusive that I was glad to be able to experience early on is Kirby Air Riders. This game just has so much attention to detail, so much love and care put into it, and it offers some high speed but short, quick play sessions that are a lot of fun. Everything in this game kind of happens pretty quick, but there is a lot of variety in the gameplay. It does have a bit of a learning curve, but it's not as steep as you would think it is. Now, I would say it's not as easy to pick up and play and get into as Mario Kart World, but if you're willing to learn it a little bit, you can definitely get hooked on this game. I have to admit, I never got quite as hooked on it as I did to Mario Kart World or Donkey Kong Bonanza, but this is a really good Switch 2 exclusive that stands next to those games, in my opinion. Now, I do have one more big Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive to talk about, but before I talk about that, I want to talk about a third-party game that was really a highlight of the Switch 2's year one for me. Now, I didn't get around to playing a lot of the big AAA games like the Final Fantasy ports that we've been getting, but one game that I did play because there was just such a good word of mouth about this game is Trails in the Sky First Chapter. Now, you're seeing me holding this Nintendo Switch 1 copy, but it did get a Switch 2 edition upgrade that you could get for just $1. And this game was absolutely phenomenal and is one of my favorite games that I have played on the Nintendo Switch 2. This is an incredible turn-based JRPG that does have a mix of some action combat as well. It has an amazing soundtrack, amazing characters, party members, a lot of great attention to detail, world building, a great story, just a can't miss JRPG. If you like turn-based JRPGs, this is a game that I highly recommend playing on any platform, and I'm really glad to have been able to play the Switch 2 edition of this game when it came out, because I would imagine it does probably look and run a little bit rough on the Switch 1. So having the new Switch 2 technology is definitely a plus to enjoy third-party games. And the final game that I really have been enjoying playing on the Nintendo Switch 2 is an exclusive that really surprised me. I have a full video about it on my channel if you want to check that out. But that game is Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. This game is really different, unique, and I would say kind of innovative with the gameplay, because the way this game works is you do go into these 2D platforming levels, but it doesn't play like a standard 2D platformer. It's more like every level is kind of like an individual mini kind of sandbox, and you're just exploring, finding collectibles, kind of solving different puzzles, interacting with these different creatures, finding out how they interact with you, with each other, and the environment. And there's just a lot of cool platforming mechanics to enjoy in this game as well. But I would say the real meat and potatoes is definitely in the exploration and in the puzzle solving. I just really did not expect to like a modern Yoshi game so much. And I know the narrative around this game has been that it's a baby game, but it's actually not. There is a lot of challenge in actually solving the puzzles, finding the collectibles, and using your brain to think outside the box and discover things in this game. So now that I'm done talking about all of my favorite gaming experiences on the Nintendo Switch 2, I do have to admit that there were really only 4 exclusives that really made the Nintendo Switch 2 worth buying for me. But I did know what I was getting into by buying this console on day one. I wasn't expecting it to have a full-on library like the Nintendo Switch 1 has, of course, but I do think Nintendo did solid. I think their first-party output could have been a little better. I think they needed one more big game, but what really helped carry them was their focus on getting good third-party support. I would say their game output for year one, combined with Switch 2 exclusives and third-party support, I'd give them like a 7 or 8 out of 10 for their output with games this year. So last but definitely not least, I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 console and hardware itself. I do have to say that holding this thing in my hands, the console feels really premium. It's a really nice upgrade, even over the Nintendo Switch OLED. I am somebody that plays primarily in handheld mode, and a lot of people were just making it seem like the Switch 2 screen was going to be a big upgrade from the OLED. But honestly, since upgrading to the Switch 2, I have not wanted to play on my OLED anymore. I've tried, and just holding it in my hands, it feels like a cheap plastic toy compared to the Switch 2. And I have to say that the Switch 2 screen actually looks great. It's really vibrant, really bright. And I would honestly say, to me at least, it feels like an upgrade over the OLED. Being able to play big games at 1080p on a handheld screen is definitely a game changer. And even though this isn't an OLED, it's LCD, this is modern technology. This is not the kind of LCD that you would have had back on the Switch 1. Another big game changer for the Switch 2 is just how fast everything loads now. The games load really fast for the most part, and you can actually get on the eShop and just scroll at your own pace now. It doesn't take forever and run like dial-up internet like it did on the Nintendo Switch 1. So that's really nice upgrades to have on this console. I would say the game chat and the built-in microphone really works great as well when you're playing with friends and you can talk to them right off of your console. It sounds better than a cell phone sounds on speakerphone. The microphone on this is really high quality and a really nice feature to have now. And some other big things that I need to address is that I've never noticed ghosting on my Nintendo Switch 2 screen. I was told that the screen was really cheap, a real piece of crap, and that I would see ghosting on it. That never happened. I was told my Nintendo Switch 2 would be bricked randomly because Nintendo just hates me that much. That's never happened. I doubt it ever will. I buy a lot of pre-owned games. Never had any trouble with that. And I was also told that I would never own any of my games and all my games could be taken away at any moment. That's all BS narratives that was used for clickbait and engagement online. And honestly, as someone who still prefers true physical media, things are definitely looking pretty solid on that front right now too. We're definitely getting a lot more true physical games on the Switch 2. I would say overall, I really don't regret buying my Switch 2 system at all. This is the best handheld that I've ever held and ever played on in my life. And I'm someone who's owned not every single variation of every Nintendo handheld, but I've owned every console since the Game Boy Color as a kid. I've had the GBA, the Game Boy Advance, I've had the DS, I've had the 3DS, I've had a 2DS, I've had a PSP, I've had a PS Vita, and I would say the Nintendo Switch 2 is definitely king, the best handheld console of all time so far. But I would like to know, what do you think about it? If you have one, do you plan to pick up one? If you don't, anyway, I really do appreciate you all watching this video so much. Please help your boy out in the algorithm by hitting the like button, hitting the hype button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already for more Switch 2 content, and I'll definitely look forward to catching you all on the next video. Thank you so much for watching.